So picture this. You're walking home, minding your own business, and a 79-year-old woman you've never seen before steps into your path and says, "Can you pretend to be my daughter for a day?" You'd probably laugh, right? Maybe assume she's confused, maybe just keep walking. That's exactly what today's story starts with. And honestly, let me save that for later. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. It's beautiful to see how far these stories go.
Isabelle Renner was 27 years old, and she'd never had anyone call her sweetheart and mean it. That's not the kind of thing you say out loud, not the kind of thing you put on a resume or tell your coworkers at the hotel where you strip beds and fold sheets for $11 an hour. But it's the kind of thing that lives in your chest like a low hum you've stopped noticing until something makes it loud again. She was walking home from a double shift, earphones in, some playlist she wasn't really listening to, the kind of tired where your brain goes on autopilot and your legs just carry you. That's when the woman stepped into her path. She was maybe 5'2", 79, though Isabelle wouldn't know that yet, wearing a soft blue cardigan, buttoned wrong, one side hanging lower than the other. Her eyes were red-rimmed but steady. She wasn't crying. She looked like someone who had finished crying a long time ago and now just carried the residue of it everywhere. She looked at Isabelle and said very calmly, "Can you pretend to be my daughter for a day?" Isabelle pulled out one earphone, blinked, looked around like there might be a camera crew hiding behind a tree. Why? Half a smile, half confused. The way you'd react if a stranger on the street asked you to hold their parrot. But the woman didn't laugh, didn't explain. She just stood there, trembling, waiting, like she'd used every ounce of courage she had left just to say those 8 words, and now she had nothing left for a follow-up. Isabelle shook her head, said something polite, "I'm sorry, I hope you're okay," and kept walking. She made it about 40 steps, and then she stopped. She didn't know why, or maybe she did and just didn't want to name it. Something about that woman's voice, something about the way she didn't chase, didn't beg, just watched Isabelle walk away like she was used to watching people leave. Isabelle stood there for maybe 5 seconds. 5 seconds that split her life into before and after. She turned around. She led the woman to a bench a few steps away, sat down beside her, crossed her arms, not out of coldness, but out of habit. Armor she didn't even know she was wearing. "Okay," Isabelle said. "Talk to me." The woman's name was Dorothy. Dot, she said. Everyone called her Dot. And then she started talking. Not fast, not desperate, slowly, like she was pulling things out of a room she hadn't opened in years. She talked about her daughter, Elise, how Elise used to hum while she cooked. Never a real song, just made-up melodies that changed every time. How she wore mismatched socks on purpose because she said life was too short for matching. How she had this laugh that made strangers and restaurants turn around and smile. How she died on a rainy Sunday morning, 4 years ago. A car accident. She was 30. Dot said she hasn't been able to listen to rain the same way since. She closes the windows now, pulls the curtains, turns up the television, because the sound of rain just sounds like that morning, over and over. Isabelle's arms slowly uncrossed. Then Dot told her what today was. The anniversary, 4 years exactly, and she said she'd spent every one of those anniversaries alone, sitting in the house they'd shared, staring at Elise's coat still hanging by the door. And then, almost as a throwaway, like she was mentioning the weather, Dot said she'd been diagnosed 3 months ago, an aggressive illness. The doctors gave her 4 to 6 months. Isabelle didn't speak. She didn't say, "I'm so sorry," or "That's terrible." She just sat there, quiet. Because sometimes the most honest response to someone's pain is to simply not run from it. But inside, something was shifting, cracking. See, here's the thing about Isabelle. She was an orphan, aged out of the foster system at 18, no parents, no siblings, no one who remembered what she looked like as a baby or kept her drawings on a fridge. She'd been in 4 different homes by the time she was 12. By 16, she'd stopped unpacking her bag. The only family she had was her fiancé, Colin Pruitt, a mechanic with steady hands and a quiet voice who'd loved her since they were teenagers in the same group home. He was the one person who stayed, but even Colin couldn't fill the specific shape of the thing she was missing. And sitting on that bench, listening to Dot describe a love so deep it outlived the person it was meant for, Isabelle realized something that almost knocked the air out of her. She'd spent 27 years angry that no mother ever chose her, and here was a mother with all the love in the world and no daughter left to give it to. The same wound, the same absence. They were just standing on opposite sides of it. Isabelle went home that night and didn't sleep. She lay beside Colin, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word. Colin asked her what was wrong. She said nothing. He didn't push. He never did. That was the thing about Colin. He gave her space even when what she actually needed was for someone to pull her closer. The next morning, she went back. She found Dot's house, a small place on a quiet street with a garden that hadn't been tended in months and a wind chime on the porch that sounded like it was apologizing for something. Dot opened the door and her face did this thing, surprise first, then a quick flash of hope she tried to smother before it could hurt her. Inside, the house was a museum of a life that stopped. Elisa's coat on the hook, 2 plates set at the kitchen table, photos everywhere, not displayed neatly, but scattered, like Dot kept picking them up and putting them down in different places, trying to find the right spot for her grief. Isabelle looked at all of it, and then she said the thing that changed both of their lives. "I don't want to be your daughter for a day, Dot. I want to be your daughter for however many days you have left." Dot stared at her. Her lip trembled. And then she broke. Not quietly, not gracefully. She broke the way people break when they've been holding something so tightly for so long that the release is almost violent. She cried into her hands, and Isabelle, this girl who had trained herself never to need anyone, put her arms around a 79-year-old stranger and held her like she was the most important person in the world. Because in that moment, she was. What followed was ordinary, and that's what made it extraordinary. Dot moved into the spare room. Colin helped carry the suitcase in. He was quiet the whole time, polite to Dot, pulled out her chair at dinner, showed her how the shower handle sticks if you turn it too fast. But that night, after Dot had gone to bed, he sat on the edge of their mattress and didn't look at Isabelle when he spoke. "Can I ask you something, and I need you to actually hear it before you get defensive?" Isabelle crossed her arms, already defensive. "Go ahead. Are you doing this for her or for you?" Silence. "Because I watched you your whole life, Belle. I know what it looks like when you're hurting, and I'm scared you're not saving this woman. I'm scared you're trying to save the little girl who never got picked up from the foster home." That one landed. Hard. Because he wasn't wrong. At least, not entirely. Isabelle sat down next to him, didn't speak for a long time, and when she finally did, her voice was smaller than he was used to hearing. "Maybe it's both. Maybe I am doing it for me. But Colin, does that make it less real? If I need her and she needs me, isn't that just how family works? People needing each other?" Colin looked at her, really looked at her, and whatever he saw in her face must have been enough, because he exhaled, pulled her close, and said, "Okay, then she stays." He wasn't the kind of man who gave long speeches, but that quiet "okay" carried more weight than 100 words. It meant, "I trust you," Even when I'm afraid for you, I trust you. After that, Colin didn't just tolerate Dot. He opened up to her. Slowly, the way he did everything, carefully, with his hands first. He fixed things for her, built the shelf, adjusted the kitchen stool so it was the right height for her. And one evening, Isabelle came home to find Colin and Dot sitting at the kitchen table playing cards, Dot accusing him of cheating with absolute conviction while Colin tried to keep a straight face. That was when Isabelle knew. This wasn't just her decision anymore. Dot wasn't her project or her bandage. Dot was becoming their family. Dot taught Isabelle to make Elise's favorite soup, a butternut squash recipe with too much nutmeg that somehow worked. Isabelle burned the first batch. Dot laughed so hard she had to sit down. Colin built a small shelf for Dot's room, and Dot stood behind him giving instructions like a retired general. A little to the left. No, my left. Higher. That's worse. Colin just grinned. They watched old movies on the couch at night. Dot always fell asleep 20 minutes in. Isabelle would drape a blanket over her and turn the volume down, and sometimes she'd just sit there in the dim light, watching this woman breathe, thinking, so this is what it feels like. One evening, Dot brushed Isabelle's hair, didn't ask, just started, and Isabelle closed her eyes and didn't move, and something in her face softened into something younger, something that had been waiting 27 years for exactly this. But underneath the warmth, the shadows moved. Dot's coughing fits, hidden in the bathroom with the faucet running, the pill bottles multiplying on the nightstand, the moments mid-laugh where her eyes would drift somewhere far away, like she was trying to memorize the room. Isabelle noticed all of it. She said nothing, because what do you say to someone who's dying? Please don't. Isabelle and Colin moved the wedding up. No big venue, no guest list drama, wildflowers in mason jars, a second-hand dress that fit almost perfectly, Colin in a borrowed suit that was slightly too long in the sleeves. But when Isabelle walked down that short aisle and saw Dot in the front row, clutching a handkerchief with Elise's initials embroidered in the corner, tears streaming but smiling wider than Isabelle had ever seen, something completed itself. This was the woman who'd had no one. No mother at her first day of school, no mother at her graduation, no mother helping her pick a dress. And now, at 27, she had one, sitting right there, choosing her, the way she'd always wanted to be chosen. After the ceremony, Dot held Isabelle's face in both hands and whispered, "Elise sent you to me, I'm sure of it." And Isabelle whispered back, "Then maybe someone sent you to me too." There was one night, about a week after the wedding, that Isabelle would replay in her mind more than any other. It was late. Colin had gone to bed early. Dot and Isabelle were on the couch with tea, and the television was off. Not because anyone turned it off, they just never turned it on. Sometimes they did that, just sat in the quiet together. And for Isabelle, who had spent most of her life alone in silence, it was strange how different silence felt when someone was in it with you. Dot was looking at her hands, turning them over slowly, like she was reading something written there. "Can I tell you something about Elise?" she said. "Always. She used to call me every Sunday morning, every single one. Didn't matter if she was busy, didn't matter if we'd argued the week before. She'd call, and the first thing she'd say was," Dot smiled, "Hi, Mama, it's your favorite daughter." Every time, like I had 12 other daughters to keep track of. Isabelle laughed softly. She could picture it. She could picture Elise, even though she'd never met her, because Dot had made her so real over these weeks. Not a ghost, not a memory frozen in sadness. A person, funny and imperfect and deeply loved. After she died, Dot continued, Sunday mornings became the hardest part of the week. I'd wake up and just stare at the phone, waiting for it to ring, knowing it wouldn't. And after a while, I stopped waiting, but I never stopped listening for it. Isabelle set her mug down. She didn't trust her voice, but she spoke anyway. Dot, what was it like being a mother? Dot looked at her, not with pity, not with sadness, with understanding. Terrifying, she said, every single day. You love someone so much it makes you stupid. You worry about things that haven't happened. You lie awake imagining worst-case scenarios. You give them everything and then worry you didn't give enough. She paused. It's the most exhausting, irrational, beautiful thing I've ever done. Was it worth it? Even knowing how it ended? Dot reached over and took Isabelle's hand. Her grip was weak but deliberate. Sweetheart, it was worth it because of how it ended. Not the accident, not the grief. I mean all of it. Every Sunday phone call, every burnt dinner, every argument about nothing, every time she walked through the door and I thought, there she is, there's my girl. 30 years of that. I wouldn't trade a single second, not even to avoid the pain. Isabelle was crying, not loudly, just tears running down her face, landing on the blanket. I never had that, she whispered. I never had someone who thought, there she is, when I walked into a room. Dot squeezed her hand tighter. You do now. They sat there for a long time after that, not speaking, just two women on a couch in a small apartment, holding hands, letting the silence be full instead of empty. And the next Sunday morning, Isabelle's phone rang at 8 a.m. She picked up, and Dot's voice came through from the other room, 10 feet away, calling from the spare bedroom. Hi, sweetheart. It's your favorite mother. Isabelle laughed until she cried, and then she cried until she laughed, and Dot just stayed on the line, listening, the way mothers do. A few weeks later, Isabelle came home from work. The apartment was quiet, not the normal kind of quiet, a different kind, the kind that has weight. Dot was in her chair, by the window, the one she always sat in because, she said, the light reminded her of Elise's kitchen. Her eyes were closed. There was a faint smile on her face, not frozen, just settled, like she'd been in the middle of a thought she didn't mind leaving unfinished. And in her lap, a small envelope, Isabelle's name on the front, written in a hand that shook but didn't stop. She was gone. Inside the letter, Dot told Isabelle something she'd never said out loud. Their meeting on the walkway wasn't chance. Dot had seen Isabelle before. Weeks earlier, at a grocery store, she'd watched a young woman with tired eyes count coins at the register, put 2 items back, pay, and walk out alone. No one called her, no one was waiting, and Dot had stood there in aisle 7, holding a can of soup and thought, that girl has no one, just like me. She'd gone back to that neighborhood several times after that, hoping, looking, not knowing exactly what she'd say if she found her. Then, on the anniversary of Elise's death, the loneliest day of her year, she saw Isabelle again, walking down the same tree-lined path, earphones in, head down. Dot didn't approach Isabelle because she looked like Elise, though the resemblance gave her courage. She approached her because she recognized something deeper than appearance. She recognized the loneliness, the specific kind that lives in someone who has never been claimed by anyone. One motherless daughter reaching for another. The letter ended with this: You didn't pretend to be my daughter, Isabelle. You became her. And because of you, I didn't die alone. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. Weeks later, Isabelle set 2 plates at the dinner table. Colin walked in, saw the second plate, looked at her. She didn't explain. He just looked at the empty chair by the window and then sat down. She'd learned it from Dot. You keep setting the plate. You keep leaving the space. Not because you're stuck in grief, but because love doesn't stop when someone dies. It just changes seats at the table. So that was the story of Isabelle and Dot. And honestly, what stays with me isn't the sad parts, it's the choice. Isabelle had every reason to keep walking. She was tired, She was broke. She didn't know this woman. And nobody would have blamed her for staying in her lane and going home. But she turned around, and that single decision gave a dying woman her daughter back. Now, here's something I want to leave you with. There's a concept in psychology called the helper's paradox. The idea that when we choose to help someone during our own difficult season, we often end up healing ourselves in the process. It's not about ignoring your own pain. It's about discovering that your pain actually qualifies you to recognize someone else's. Isabelle didn't help Dot because her life was together. She helped her because it wasn't. And in doing that, she found what she'd been missing all along. I wanted to share this story because I think we all walk past someone who needs us every day. And we don't stop, not because we're cruel, but because we're busy. We're tired. We think it's not our problem. But what if it only takes 5 seconds? What if the bravest thing you ever do is just turn around? If this story made you feel something, drop a comment. Tell me, who in your life showed up for you when they didn't have to? I'd love to read those stories. Hit that like button if this one resonated. It truly helps the channel grow.
And if you love stories with heart and meaning, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I'm David, this is Isabelle's Stories, and I will see you in the next one.